Good morning, everybody, or good evening, whatever. So thank you very much, Giovanni, for organizing this afternoon for this workshop. So just to make us travel a bit, even virtually, this is a picture of Messina, where is Giovanni. So today I will talk about spin-orbit interaction and especially how it can be used to interconvert spin and charge current. I think there are two main interests in doing this by doing this spin-orbit interaction is that now the way we can transform the geometry we can take advantage of to convert spin and charge current is different from the one where we use exchange interaction. And also the fact that we use a spin-orbit interaction allows us also to extend spintronic to a much broader range of class of materials. And this is what I will mainly focus on today because we can work on topological insulators, semiconductor, oxide, and insulators. So conventionally, we have used ferromagnetic, non-magnetic interfaces to inject spin current. It leads to magnetoresistance effect and spin transfer torque effects. This can be done by applying a charge current, but also by heat gradient, spin pumping, and so on. So here, in that case, the flow of for example, in the case of the charge current, is transverse to the interface, at least in the CPP condition, which is of the main interest. In the case of spin-orbit coupling, for example, here you see in the case of spinel effect, we will convert a charge current into a transverse spin current, for example, in this case. So in this case, the current, for example, can flow along the interface, not necessarily across the interface. This is the same, for example, in the Edelstein effect that will develop at the interface between a non-magnetic material through the Rashba effect. And this is now we have two possibilities to generate torque, for example, or to do spintronic, either to use a current across the interface or along an interface. And also what I have said is that using the spin-orbit coupling, instead of being using only metals, we can now use semiconductor, oxide, magnetic, and topological insulators. So in the case of the spinel effect, just a quick reminder, there is the direct and inverse spinel effect that allows you to transform a charge current into a spin current and vice versa. There are several mechanisms at the origin of it, and one of the key parameters that has been put forward is the spinel angle. Nonetheless, not only the spinel angle is important in this mechanism, is also the resistivity, conductivity of the materials. As you can see that depending on the different microscopic origins, skew scattering, side jump, intrinsic contribution, they will influence the spinel angle in a different way. The third parameter that is also important in this case is the spin diffusion length of the material, and the spin diffusion length, it also depends strongly on the resistivity of the materials. So there have been lots of studies on the metals and with a large range of spinel angles reported. In my today's talk, I will mainly focus on the Edelstein effect that appears at in 2D electron gases. So here is the cut of the Fermi contour at of these states. And for example, when you will flow a charge current, for example, here in the case of a topological insulator, you have a single Fermi contour. You will shift in momentum space this Fermi contour, and this will induce an accumulation of spin up and a deficit of spin down. The same occurs in Rashba interfaces, but in Rashba interfaces, you have two contours with opposite chiralities. So you will blur a bit this spin up accumulation by this spin down one. The reciprocal mechanism also exists. In that case, you inject in those 2D states a spin accumulation, and you will shift in momentum space the Fermi contour that in turn generates a charge current. The main technique that we have been using for doing all this study is to use spin pumping. The spin pumping, we use the ferromagnetic resonance to inject a pure spin current from a ferromagnet, for example here CFB, cobalt ion boron, into, let's say, a platinum, and this spin current will be transformed into a transverse charge current that we can measure easily by voltage in open circuit condition. This is an example. Here you have the derivative of the absorption spectra, and at this resonance develops a large symmetrical voltage. So the spin current that we'll inject is directly proportional to the extra Gilbert damping that will occur when you attach, for example, platinum to cobalt ion boron. What we also, it's important is to be sure that this signal is indeed related to a conversion effect, and there are several control experiments that you can do, for example, using symmetries, but you can also use temporal bolometric experiment to check that indeed this is related to the ferromagnetic resonance and not to, for example, a heating of the sample. Then you estimate the charge current that has been produced by just dividing this measured voltage by the resistance of the slab, and having the spin current injected and the produced charge current, you can do some quantitative estimation of the conversion efficiency. When we have done the experiment on silver bismuth, where we want to take advantage of the large Rashba effect appearing at this interface, we figure out that in fact, in that case, the analysis is a bit different than in the case of the spinel effect. So first of all, about the experiment, so we used nickel ion. We brought nickel ion at ferromagnetic resonance to inject a spin current into a silver bismuth stack. We did two control experiments. Nickel ion in direct contact with silver, where there is no produced charge current at the resonance. Nickel ion in direct contact with bismuth, where there is a sizable production of a transverse charge current. But what is much more interesting is the case where we have formed an interface between silver and bismuth, in this case, where we have the largest production. So here the sample looks much more interesting than the other one in terms of interconversion. But in that case, we are injecting a three-dimensional spin current density and convert into an interfacial charge current density. And so the ratio here between these two currents has a dimension of a length, and we call it inverse Edelstein length. So this is something that is pretty much different with the analysis of the spinel effect, because in the spinel effect, both mechanism, direct and inverse, will use the exactly same spinel angle, which is not the case in the case of Rashba and Edelstein effects. So in the case of silver bismuth, we extracted an inverse Edelstein length of the order of 0.3 nanometer. So here is the outline of my talk. So I want to first present you some interest in using, for example, a topological insulator. In topological insulators, you will have two surfaces, and what you want to play with is the coupling between those two surfaces. So we have used a mercury telluride. Mercury telluride, that is a material that is known from and grown from long time in Grenoble by Philippe Ballet, that is very well mastered with very sharp, at least even seen from the chemical point of view, sharp interfaces, where the Dirac cone has been observed by ARPES, and also that through spectroscopy of the gas, for example, by the group of Tristan Meunier at Nel Institute, where they have observed subject of the gas oscillation on very nice quantum Hall effect plateaus. And moreover, a material where you can achieve a mobility of the order of 500,000. So here is the spin pumping experiment that we have been carried out. And here, just to show you how nicely can be this system, we just compare in blue a sample of reference, which is platinum and permalloy, and in red, the sample with the mercury telluride. So on the top, this is the derivative of the spin absorption spectra. And at the bottom, the produced charge current at resonance. And you see that, first of all, the curve in red, so the case of mercury telluride, produced a much larger current than the case of than the platinum sample, but also that the damping is much smaller, the line width, so the damping is much smaller in the case of mercury telluride respect to the blue curve, that is the case of platinum. So we produce more current while we inject less current density. And so in that case, the inverse Edelstein that we estimate is around 2 nanometers. We study the insertion of insulating barrier between nickel ion and mercury telluride, and we see that the best, the optimum situation is not when the ferromagnetic layer is put in direct contact with the topological insulator, but when we have had a small insulating barrier, and that after, if we increase this barrier, the current production decreases, as we expect, with less and less coupling due to the barrier between the ferromagnet and the mercury telluride. Then we study the evolution of this spin-to-charge conversion as a function of the thickness of the mercury telluride. And this is the kind of curve that we obtain, that has a known and very distinct evolution respect to the case of spinol materials. In that case, we start with very slow increase of the charge of the inverse Edelstein length, and we reach a peak before decreasing again, which is in sharp contrast with the tangent hyperbola increase of the produced charge current in the case of platinum. So where is the origin of this non-trivial evolution? We know, in fact, from, for example, the work of Neupan, that at the function of the thickness of the topological insulator, you will, at very low thicknesses, have no net spin polarization. You open a gap, the two surfaces are coupled, and you have no, the two surfaces having opposite chiralities, you have no net polarization. And you need to increase the thickness of the topological insulator to really get the nice Dirac cone and and decouple the top and bottom surfaces. In the case of mercury telluride, the wave extension is quite large, and we know that we expect a decoupling between the top and bottom surfaces of around 25 nanometer, when we should have the maximum net polarization, the two surfaces being almost fully decoupled. On the other hand, if we increase too much the thickness of the topological insulator, they are not perfect material, there are some defects. And as you can see, for example, for the resistance as a function of the temperature for different thicknesses of the mercury telluride, you see that you go from metal to insulator transition to situation where the square resistance does not evolve anymore with the temperature, because you are mainly driven by the surface states. In the case of thicker thicknesses, then we have a strong contribution from the bulk that you are here starting to freeze. And this bulk contribution is known. This is the work from the group of Eiji Saito, that it induces an extra relaxation channel. So part of the spin density that you inject in those 2D surface state are being absorbed by the bulk and not converted. So you have to, in fact, renormalize your Edelstein length by taking into account this bulk to surface contribution. So this explains this non-trivial evolution. So at first, you need to, by increasing the thickness, you decouple the two surfaces and increase the polarization, while at larger thicknesses, the role of the bulk becomes more and more important, and the efficiency of the conversion decreases. The next case I want to talk about is the role of electrostatic gating in oxide material, because in those oxide 2D-dimensional electron gas, we can, through a backgate voltage, raise the Fermi level into the bond structure. And then we want to see what is the influence on the conversion and the spin-orbit coupling. So, STO-LAO system is a well-known system since a bit more than 15 years, while they are both insulators, STO and LAO. When you put them together, you form a two-dimensional electron-like system. And so we have done, in collaboration with Agnès Barthélémy, Manuel Vibes, and Edouard Lehn, a study on these STO-LAO interfaces, where the Rashba is not very much important in principle, but there is very nice properties of the two-dimensional electron gas with quite large mobilities. So we have used a nickel ion to inject a spin current into this two-dimensional electron system and study the conversion in this system. And the first thing we could observe in this system, so it is at low temperature, 7K in this case, is that the inverse Edelstein length can become a giant of the order, for example, of 6 nanometers in this case. Second important thing is that when we change the gate applied from the backside of the sample, so we are raising the Fermi level in the bond structure of this two-dimensional electron gas, we were able to both change the amplitude of the conversion, but also the sign. And this is something that is very interesting. We also more recently follow the work of Rodel that have shown that in fact we might not really need to deposit LAO, which needs a very specific deposition condition to form a two-dimensional electron gas at the surface of STO, and that more generally, just by depositing a reactive metal, you could also obtain a two-dimensional electron gas. So, still in collaboration with CNRS Thales and the work of Diogo Vaz, he has studied as a function of aluminium, how by XPS, how the different ratio of the titanium 4+, 3+, and 2+ states are evolving as a function of the aluminium thickness. We have also studied by TEM, ILS, and EDX, how this deposition of aluminium changed the chemical state of titanium. First observation is that indeed, when aluminium is deposited, some oxygen goes into the aluminium, and in parallel to that, the titanium 4+ of the bare STO sample is decreasing, while the number of titanium 3+ or 2+ is increasing. What does it mean? It's that we are reducing the STO substrate with the aluminum. We are taking out some oxygen from the STO substrate, but it will have some oxygen vacancy in the substrate that will act as a donor. And this is the mechanism of formation of the gas. So as a function of the temperature of the gate, we can modulate the carrier density, in that case, from 7 to 10 to the 13 square centimeters. And as in STO-LEO, we do observe that the conversion can be changed by the gate voltage, changing its amplitude, but also its sign. So our colleagues in Geneva and LPS model observe and model from the ARPES data the bond structure of this STO system, having 4 bonds plus the spins, so a total of 8 bonds. And the colleagues in Halle have calculated from the expected spin density what will be the Edelstein tensor as a function of the energy of the Fermi level energy. I will not go too much into the detail here, but as a function of the position of the Fermi level within this bond structure with light and heavy electrons, you will go through some cuts where you have only 1 contour, 2 contours, and so on and so on. And as those contours have opposite chiralities, when a new contour enters into the play, you will change the sign of the conversion. And you will also go through some maximas where you have the anti-crossing appearing, because you have enhancement of the spin orbit in that case. So several Fermi contours of several chiralities, which leads to this sign change and also those maxima in the conversion. So just to remind you, this is the experimental data, and I hope that the theoretical curve convince you with the nice match of this explanation and calculation. So the last coupling we could also take advantage of is to couple and try to control the spin orbit coupling in a remanent way through ferroelectric effect. Ideally, if we put a spin orbit system on the top of ferroelectric, and if we change the ferroelectric polarization of this ferroelectric, we could eventually reverse the chirality of the Fermi contour and then reverse the sign of the conversion. So this will also allow for a remanent control of the sign of the conversion, depending if you are in this case or in this case. And this is extremely interesting, for example, in view of the magnetoelectric spin orbit devices proposed by Intel. That is a concept for post-CMOS computing, because this type of strategy could merge in a single device both the writing and the reading element of this magnetoelectric spin orbit device. So we have applied a very large electrical field to the STO. At quite low electrical field, the STO is done as no polarization curve. And when we achieve sufficiently large electrical field, we start to see an opening of a ferroelectric curve with its polarization vanishing around 50K. In line with that, the resistance, the square resistance of the gas is also altered by this electrical field with a small remanence, difference in remanence respected from the history of the hysteresis loop. Now we turn on to the spin pumping experiment, and by applying a sweep of the electrical field, we could, in that case, achieve two states at large positive or very negative electrical field, so quite large value of charge current production that are, in that case, remanent at zero gate voltage. And also, if you apply a pulse of in one direction, you will keep the same current production. And in that case, the Edelstein length that we estimate was around of the order of 60 nanometers. So much larger than the other presented system, probably that the ferroelectric field adds up to the spin orbit coupling of the STO. We also checked that the sample, this remanence was, the states were stable over several hours. So I would like to conclude, and first thanks our colleagues in CNRS Thales, Halle, University of Genova, SPCI, LPS, and colleagues in Grenoble, and especially I would like to thank Paul Noël, Diogo Vaz, Annika Johansson, and Borge Gobel, who did most of this work. Thank you very much for your attention. Maybe I'm out of time, so I leave my conclusions here.